Hi guys, so this is my demonstration and I'm going to be talking about ukulele and middle school general music. So my starting lesson plan, the goals, objectives, and performance tasks. So my goals for student understanding were that they'd understand that ukuleles are a type of string instruments that can play chords like a guitar. So like a violin is a stringed instrument, it's a little bit different and more similar to guitar. Each string on the ukulele is tuned to a certain note, so our open strings play certain pitches. Each fret increases by a half step, and chords are when two or more notes are played at the same time. Some essential questions I would ask would be, why might they be called tuners? What is a chord? What is a half step? And you'll see how those relate to my learning objectives, or not objectives, but my learning procedures in a little bit. The student objectives for this lesson were that students will be able to identify the different parts of the ukulele, and that's when the tuners come in. Identify what note each string produces in standard tuning, so the open notes. How to hold the ukulele with correct posture and hand position. They're going to learn a new vocabulary word, chord. They're going to perform the chords C major, a G7, A minor, and F major on the ukulele. And they're going to perform these chords on the ukulele to a pop song. So the performance tasks, at the end of this lesson, students will play the chords to the song I'm Yours by Jason Mraz. And they will play along with the recording. I'm not expecting this to be perfect because it is the first time they're going to be playing these chords in this lesson, but I chose to have them play a song the first lesson because I think it gets them excited for the whole unit. And even if they aren't super successful, still trying their best to play along would be awesome. So, and for other evidence, they will be able to play the chord progression C, G7, A minor, and F. So the learning activities. The first thing I would do is introduce ukuleles and the different parts of the ukulele. I might start with singing a song first to get them intrigued and interested, but the main part of the lesson that I would do first is introduce the ukuleles and the different parts. So we talk about the tuners, frets, the fretboard, neck, body, headstock, sound hold, and bridge. And we talk about what each of their purposes are on the ukulele. And I'd have them touch and point it on their own ukulele as we're discussing it. Then I would talk about tuning the ukulele. I would definitely have the ukuleles tuned before the students came to the lesson, especially for this first lesson. And then I would go from explaining how to tune and maybe demonstrating on my own ukulele. We talk about holding the ukulele and beginning strumming. From there, I'm going to introduce them to their first chord, which is the C chord. So I would tell them that the ring finger goes on the 3rd fret of the A string, and that they should be using the fingertips. I would have them practice using different parts of the finger so that they can hear what's wrong, but also then they know what is correct. I would go around and check the students and make sure their fingers are placed properly, using the proper part of the finger, holding it properly, and that they're comfortable. Then from there, we'd all play that chord together, and then I would have student volunteers come up and play different rhythms just on that chord. And I'd still walk around and assist when needed while the student volunteers are up there playing the different rhythms. I would have students volunteer to do that because I think it gets them improvising different rhythms and kind of creating in a way. And from there, we'd go to the G7 chord. So I'd explain once again where their fingers are going to go, walk around, assist when needed, and I'd even have some other students, if they've already been exposed to ukulele maybe on their own time, I could have them walk around and assist as well. And then once the students understand the G7 chord, I'd have them practice going back and forth. Now that's a lot, and that may take up the entire period. So that may be the first lesson. But I always want to be prepared and have more planned just in case the students are getting it. And because I do want them to play that song, I would introduce another chord, the A minor chord. So once again, tell them where their fingers go and walk around and assist when needed. And then I'd have them practice the C, G7, A minor progression a couple times, just so they're used to getting their fingers moving and building up that strength. From there, I'd introduce the F chord. Once again, where fingers go and assisting when needing. And then I would have them practice the whole chord progression, C, G7, A minor, F. Now, once again, that could be the first lesson, that could be the start of the second lesson. It all depends where my students are at and how the lesson is going. But the end goal for this would be to play I'm Yours. So they would play the chord progression alone without the recording first. So I would have them play for 2 half notes for each chord. So C, C, G7, G7. So we'd start slow and then speed it up to get to the tempo for I'm Yours. And then once the entire class can do the progression 3 times in a row with 95% accuracy, because they're not going to be perfect the entire time, or we can't have everyone perfect the entire time. But if we can get everyone to 95% accuracy, we put on the recording and have students play along. So that was my starting lesson plan. From there, I went to creating the unit. So the main concepts for the unit is to get students to be able to play the chords C, G7, A minor, and F on the ukulele, and I want them to play it in that progression for different songs. So the objectives would be to perform the chords C, G7, A minor, and F on the ukulele, identify where to put their fingers based on the tab shown, define what a chord progression is, identify the chord progression for the song I'm Yours by Jason Mraz, and perform a song with the chord progression 1, 5, 7, 6, 4 in the key of C major on their ukuleles for the class. So on to the lessons. Lesson number 1, well, this would actually be lesson number 2. My starting lesson would be lesson number 1. But the objectives for this would have students be able to identify where to put their fingers based on the tab shown, and students will be able to perform chords on the ukulele by reading tabs. So I would start with reviewing the chords C, G7, A minor, F, practicing the progression, reviewing the song I'm Yours, how to hold the ukulele, all those things, starting with review. Then the main part of the lesson is introducing tabs to students. So I would start by introducing the tabs for the chords that they know, so C, G7, A minor, and F. And then I would show different examples and have students identify what strings will be open and what frets to place what finger on. So they're not going to be playing the chords. I would, if they wanted to, I would let them mute the strings and try to play, or find where their fingers would go to play that chord. But the goal is to get students to understand how to read the tab. So that's my goal and objective for this lesson. An essential question would be, what is the purpose of a tab? And why would a tab be used instead of sheet music? So getting students to think, when would they use a tab? Why would they use a tab? And its purpose. And then at the end of the class, they'll perform I'm Yours by Jason Mraz again, but this time the students will follow along with a tab. The second lesson, students will define what a chord progression is. Prior to this lesson, I would want students to know how to figure out Roman numerals for a key signature or the chords, but then I would have them using Roman numerals, they'll identify the chord progression for the song I'm Yours by Jason Mraz. So they would figure out that it is 1, 5, 7, 6, 4. Once again, review everything we've talked about. So reviewing the tabs, reviewing open strings, reviewing the chords. and I would introduce the term chord progression, and then ask students why would it be helpful to know the chord progression for a song, and get their brains thinking about why they would want to know it, what's helpful about it. And then we'd review, because I said before I would want them to know how to figure out Roman numerals for chords in a key signature. So this would be taught before the unit, but we'd review how to figure out the Roman numerals for chords for a certain key. And then I would use many keys for practice. From there, I would ask students what chords we used for the song I'm Yours, and they tell me what chords we used. And I would tell them that the key of the song is in C major. So I would ask them what the Roman numerals would be for each chord, and they would figure out the chord progression for I'm Yours. I would show a little bit of this video I found. Not the entire thing, but I'd show this video to demonstrate how many songs use that chord progression. And I'll click it right now.
Recognize this? Yeah, that's Don't Stop Believing by Journey. And the cast of Glee. Yeah, there's a few more songs in the same chorus. Check it out. My life is brilliant. My love is pure. I saw an angel. Of that I'm sure. People kill and people dying. Children hurt and you hear them crying. Can you practice what you preach? Won't you turn the other cheek? Forever young, I wanna be forever young.
Yeah, so I would use that to demonstrate why we're learning what we're learning. Let's see if I can get this back to presentation. So after watching that video, or at least a little bit of it, I would break students up into groups of 4. I might let students choose the groups or choose one partner and then put 2 groups of partners together, but they would be into groups of 4. And using Chromebooks or iPads, the school I will be working at has Chromebooks, which I think is great. Students will research and find another song that has that same chord progression. So the 1, 5, 6, 4. The song needs to be one that the entire group agrees on or likes enough to perform for the class. So going into the 3rd lesson, students will perform a song with the chord progression 1, 5, 7, 6, 4 in the key of C major on their ukuleles. So I would start this lesson reviewing the chords. I'd allow student volunteers to come up and play rhythms or chord progressions for the class to echo, so a call and response, once again getting them creating and improvising. And then I would review what a chord progression is and have students get back into their groups from the previous lesson, and if they're not finished selecting the song, give them time to continue researching and finding a song that has the same chord progression. Once the songs have been selected, students will then transpose if need be so that the song is in the key of C major. So the chord progression will not change, but so they can figure out which chords to play when. So students will print out the lyrics and write the chords above the lyrics so they know when to change chords. So I would provide this example. This is Hazel Sister, of what I'm looking the students to do on the lyric sheets. So students will rehearse at least one verse and one chorus of the song to perform for the class. They can all sing. They can select certain group members to sing. So if they don't think they can sing and play at the same time, that's okay. If they just want to have a few people sing. I'd like everyone to be playing a ukulele though. So if nobody's comfortable enough to be singing and playing at the same time, they may ask the teacher to put on a recording of the song for them to play along with. And some essential questions I would have for the students is what makes a good performance. So while they're rehearsing, they can think about the criteria for that. And I would also ask them before the performance starts, what makes a good audience member? I think that's important too, because you don't want people talking during someone else's performance or not paying attention or things like that. And then at the end of the class, or if they still need times to rehearse, this might turn into a 5-lesson unit, but students will then perform their chosen song for the class. So on to assessment and why I chose this unit. Students will be assessed on their final group performance. They will be assessed using a rubric, and the rubric will score them on the chord selections. So if they had to transpose, did they transpose correctly, so that it's in C major? The accuracy of chord changes, so changing at the appropriate time. Accuracy of playing the chords, C, G7, A minor, and F. And the continuity of the performance. So if they messed up, which is totally fine because we all do, were they able to stay composed and continue, or did they just give up and stop putting in effort? So I think the effort thing is a big thing that can help boost some kids' grades, because this is a hard thing for some kids to do. And so why I chose this unit. I think this unit would fit in with middle school and the target course because it has students performing, creating, and connecting. So 3 out of 4 of the standards. The students are performing and creating each class when they begin learning the chords. They create patterns and chord progressions for the class to echo, and they're kind of improvising that way. And the students begin really connecting in lesson 2 when they hear and research different songs with the same chord progressions. So when I showed that video or would show that video, those are all songs they could hear outside of school and, songs they might listen to on their own time. So it can help make the connection between what we're learning in school and their home life. The final performance has students rehearsing, refining, and reflecting so that they are prepared for the final performance. It gets them thinking about, it gets them using everything that I taught them in this unit. So I think it's a good way to wrap it up and demonstrate their learning. So this was my e-demonstration and unit overview. If you need any more clarification or have any questions or suggestions for me, please reach out to me. Thanks so much.